A single piece of paper can be the difference between a massive tip and a bloodbath. When 24-year-old waitress Isla handed a receipt to Philadelphia's most feared man, she didn't just circle her tip. She circled the words, "Gunman behind you. Deal gone wrong. Exit now." What followed changed everything. The Ashwood Grill on Walnut Street was the kind of establishment where Philadelphia's elite went to chew on $85 dry-aged ribeyes and pretend they owned the city. It smelled of truffle butter, expensive cigar smoke drifting in from the patio, and old money. For Isla Monroe, it was just a place to wear a stiff white button-down, smile until her cheeks ached, and chip away at the crushing medical debt her father had left behind. It was a rainy Tuesday night in November, the kind of evening when the restaurant sat half full, bathed in the dim golden glow of brass chandeliers. Isla was working Section 4, the secluded booths in the back, typically reserved for politicians, athletes, or men who didn't want their faces caught through the street-facing windows. Tonight, Booth 41 was occupied by Marco Valenti. Everyone in the downtown service industry knew who Marco Valenti was, even if the Inquirer only ever called him a prominent logistics entrepreneur. At 34, Marco was the undisputed head of the Valenti syndicate. He possessed a terrifying stillness, a sharp, dark-haired man in bespoke charcoal suits, and a vintage Patek Philippe worth more than Isla's life insurance policy. He never barked orders or treated staff like servants. He was meticulously polite, tipped a staggering 100%, and tipped in crisp, uncreased hundreds. But tonight, the air around Marco's table was thick with suffocating tension. He was dining with Sonny Barone, a notorious capo from the rival Calderone family. Sonny was Marco's opposite in every way. Sweaty, loud, drowning in cologne, constantly glancing at his phone. They were supposedly negotiating a truce over the South Philly shipping routes. But Isla, whose older brother Caleb had once run numbers for a small-time Calderone book, knew the quiet language of the streets. She recognized a bad deal when she saw one. Sonny was overcompensating, laughing too hard at jokes that weren't funny, and he hadn't touched a drop of his $400 bottle of Opus One. A man doesn't waste wine like that, unless he knows he won't be staying. At 10:15 p.m., the heavy mahogany doors swung open. A man stepped inside, shaking off a soaked trench coat. Isla was standing at the POS terminal, punching in an order for creamed spinach, when she noticed him. The newcomer didn't wait for the hostess. He bypassed the dining room entirely and took a seat at the far end of the mahogany bar, ordering an espresso he never touched. He kept his coat on despite the heat. He kept his leather gloves on too. More importantly, Isla noticed his eyes. He wasn't watching the bartender. He was staring dead into the massive antique mirror behind the bar, a mirror that offered a perfect, unobstructed reflection of Booth 41, where Marco sat with his back to the room. A cold prickle of dread crawled up the back of Isla's neck. She watched Sonny subtly tap his water glass twice. In the mirror, the man in the trench coat slid his gloved hand slowly into his coat pocket. It was a setup. Sonny had lured Marco out of his fortress in Fishtown into neutral territory. The truce was a lie. If that man pulled a trigger, Marco Valenti would be dead before his stake arrived. But Isla's mind raced past Marco to the collateral damage. If bullets started flying in that enclosed dining room, the crossfire would be a massacre. Waiters, bartenders, innocent diners, all fed into the meat grinder. She couldn't just stand there. And deep down, despite everything Marco was, she remembered the night a drunken patron had grabbed her waist, and Marco had quietly stepped in, giving the man a look so glacial he'd practically sprinted out of the restaurant. Marco was a monster, maybe. But a monster with a code. Sonny suddenly stood, dabbing his mouth with a linen napkin. "Excuse me a minute, Marco. Men's room. Order us another bottle of the Opus, yeah? The oldest trick in the book." The hit was going down. The second Sonny cleared the blast zone. Isla's heart slammed against her ribs like a trapped bird. She had maybe 30 seconds. She rushed to the terminal, hands shaking so badly she botched her passcode twice. Finally, she logged in and printed Marco's check. She snatched a thick red Sharpie from the server station. On the back of the itemized receipt, she scrawled 3 desperate sentences, pressing so hard the red ink bled through the thermal paper. "Gunman behind you. Deal gone wrong. Exit now." She slashed a heavy, frantic circle around the words, shoved the receipt into the sleek black leather check presenter, and forced her trembling hands still. Then she pasted on her most apologetic customer service smile and walked toward Booth 41. The man at the bar had fully turned around now, espresso abandoned, his right hand deep inside his coat, as he slid off the stool and took a slow step toward the dining floor. Isla reached the table. Marco was casually checking his watch, his face unreadable. "I'm so sorry to interrupt, Mr. Valenti," Isla said, her voice remarkably steady, despite the adrenaline flooding her veins. "But your card was declined. Could you take a look at the slip for me?" Marco's dark eyes flicked up, his brow creased a fraction. His card had never been declined in his life, and he hadn't handed anyone a card tonight. Isla didn't give him time to question it. She set the black leather book on the table, leaned in 1 inch, and firmly tapped her index finger twice against the cover. The eye contact she held was not the polite, deferential gaze of a waitress. It was a screaming, desperate warning. Marco said nothing. He flipped the book open. His eyes locked onto the aggressive red ink. the heavy circles around gunman, deal, and exit. For one agonizing second, time inside the Ashwood grill stood absolutely still. Marco Valenti did not gasp. He did not glance over his shoulder. He gave the hitman not one microscopic tell that the ambush had been burned. Instead, he looked calmly up at Isla, his dark eyes hardening into shards of black ice. "Thank you, Isla," he murmured, a low, graveled hum that sent a shiver down her spine. "Get down." Before her brain could process the command, hell broke loose. Marco's right hand shot beneath his tailored jacket, while his left gripped the edge of the massive oak dining table. With an explosive surge of brute strength, he kicked upward and flipped the 500-pound slab. Plates shattered, silverware scattered, and the untouched bottle of Opus 1 exploded in a spray of deep red that looked horrifyingly like blood. Pff, pff, the muffled mechanical spits of a suppressed 9mm ripped the air. The leather booth, where Marco's chest had been a millisecond earlier, ruptured, spitting foam and cotton. Screams tore across the restaurant. Diners dove under tables. The elegant hum of the Ashwood dissolved instantly into primal chaos. Isla shrieked and dropped behind the heavy wooden pillar of the server station, covering her head, breath coming in ragged gasps as glass rained around her. From behind the overturned table, Marco returned fire, the deafening crack of his unsuppressed pistol, booming like a cannon. One shot, two. A heavy thud told Isla the man from the bar was down. But the nightmare wasn't over. The front doors burst open, and 3 more men in heavy coats flooded in. Sonny's backup crew. They didn't care about collateral. They raised automatic weapons, and the dining room became a war zone. Wood splintered, chandeliers shattered, drywall dusted the air like snow. Suddenly a strong, unyielding hand clamped around Isla's wrist. She screamed, kicking, but she was hauled to her feet. It was Marco. His bespoke suit was chalked white with dust, a thin line of blood sliding down his cheek, where flying crystal had grazed him. His eyes were terrifyingly focused. "Move!" he roared over the gunfire. He didn't give her a choice. He yanked her from the station, just as a volley of rounds shredded the pillar she'd been hiding behind. They sprinted for the kitchen. Marco fired blind over his shoulder, suppressing the advancing shooters long enough to kick the silver double doors open. They burst into blinding fluorescence and gleaming steel. Line cooks were already flat on the tile, hands over heads, screaming in Spanish and English. The smell of searing wagyu collided with the acrid stench of cordite. "Out the back, head down," Marco barked, shoving Isla down the narrow aisle between prep stations and roaring burners. Bullets punched through the kitchen doors behind them, pinging off copper pots, shattering a glass front refrigerator. Isla was crying now, adrenaline tears blurring everything, her non-slip shoes skidding through spilled olive oil. Marco caught her before she went down, his arm locking around her waist like a vice, half carrying her toward the red glow of the exit sign. He kicked the steel fire door open, and they spilled into the freezing, rain-slicked alley. The cold hit Isla like a slap, but there was no time to breathe. A massive armored black Escalade idled aggressively in the dark, headlights off, rear door flung wide. Beside it, laying down heavy cover fire toward the alley mouth with a rifle, stood Bruno, Marco's hulking enforcer. "In!" "Get in," Bruno bellowed over the roar. Marco threw Isla into the back seat and dove in behind her. Bruno slammed the ballistic door and jumped behind the wheel. Tires shrieked on wet asphalt, the huge engine roared, and the Escalade launched out of the alley into the chaos of Center City traffic. Inside, the silence was deafening, just the engine's thrum and Isla's frantic, shallow gasps. She pressed herself against the far door, trembling violently, staring at her blood-stained palms. She hadn't even felt the broken plates cut her. The reality of what she'd done was collapsing onto her like a falling building. She was an ordinary girl, a waitress, and she was sitting in a getaway car beside the boss of the Philadelphia underworld. Marco sat staring straight ahead. He calmly dropped the empty magazine from his pistol, letting it clatter to the floorboard, and slid in a fresh one with a sharp mechanical click. Then, slowly, he turned to look at her. The adrenaline was gone, leaving a cold, terrifying clarity. He drew the crumpled receipt from his jacket, the red ink glaring under the passing streetlights. "Sonny is a paranoid man," Marco said, dangerously soft. "He wouldn't trust a walk-in hit. He paid someone on the inside, someone to confirm my table, my routine, the moment my guard dropped. Somebody in your restaurant fed those shooters their timing." Isla shook her head frantically, terror spiking. "He thought it was her. I didn't, I swear. I just saw him at the bar. And I saw Sonny tap his glass. And my brother used to run with Calderon people, so I knew what it meant. I was only trying to help." Marco held up a hand, silencing her. "I know it wasn't you, Isla. A plant keeps me seated and comfortable. And you did the opposite." He tapped the receipt. Then he leaned closer, gunpowder and expensive cologne wrapping around her. "But Sonny watched you hand me this book. He watched me read it, and he watched me flip that table. He knows you burned his hit." Isla's heart stopped. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," Marco replied grimly, "that Sonny Barone is humiliated. He lost 3 men tonight, and his one clean shot at my territory. In his eyes, a 24-year-old waitress just embarrassed the entire Calderon family. I have to get home," Isla stammered, panic climbing her throat like bile. "My apartment, my cat's there. I have to. If you go home tonight, You're dead before sunrise, Marco stated flatly, stripping away every illusion she had left. They'll burn the whole building down, just to make the point. He looked out at the rain-streaked darkness of the city he controlled. Bruno, the Gladwin compound. Wait, no, Isla cried, pushing against the leather. You can't just kidnap me. I saved your life. Marco turned back, and for the first time, the cold, impenetrable mask slipped a fraction, revealing something fierce and deeply protective beneath it. You did save my life, Isla Monroe, he said softly, holding her panicked gaze. And in my world, a life debt is the only currency that matters. You're with me now, not as a prisoner, as my responsibility. And I promise you, as long as you stand beside me, no one wearing Calderon colors will ever touch a hair on your head. The Escalade tore into the night, carrying Isla away from everything she had known, and plunging her into a dark, seductive world she could never, ever leave. The iron gates of the Gladwin estate loomed like the mouth of a fortress, parting silently to let the battered Escalade glide onto sprawling, manicured grounds. According to an unsealed affidavit from Agent Daniel Ford of the Philadelphia FBI field office, a man who spent a decade failing to build a RICO case against the Valentes, this compound was impenetrable. Military-grade surveillance, reinforced steel panic rooms, a private detail of ex-Special Forces contractors, a gilded cage, and now it was Isla's new home. For 3 days, Isla lived in suspended reality. She was given a master suite, overlooking the frost-silvered woods of the main line. Her closet was miraculously stocked in her exact size. Her favorite drugstore lavender soap sat, absurdly, beside marble and gold in the bathroom. A private chef sent meals to her door, yet the luxury was suffocating. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard gunfire and saw Opus 1 spraying across a white tablecloth like arterial blood. Marco gave her space, though his presence saturated the vast house. From her balcony, she would see him at dawn by the tree line, smoking a single cigarette, speaking quietly with Bruno, a shadow commanding the criminal empire that breathed beneath Philadelphia's glittering skyline. On the 4th night, her suite's heavy oak door clicked open. Marco stepped inside. The tailored suits were gone. A dark, fitted cashmere sweater and slacks made him look less like a CEO and more like the lethal predator she knew he was. He carried a leather medical kit and a thick manila folder. Sit, he commanded softly, gesturing to the velvet armchair by the fireplace. Isla hesitated, then obeyed. Marco knelt in front of her and opened the kit, gently taking her right hand, inspecting the shallow, jagged cuts across her palm from the shattered plates. She had refused to let the estate's private doctor near her. You've been picking at them, he noted, his voice an intoxicating blend of reprimand and velvet. He produced a swab of antiseptic. This will sting. I can do it myself, she whispered, her pulse racing as his large, calloused fingers cradled her smaller hand. I know you can, Marco replied, not letting go. But you shouldn't have to. You've spent your whole life carrying everyone else, Isla. Let someone carry you for once. The intimacy of his touch, against the memory of the violence she'd watched him commit, made her breath hitch. As he meticulously wrapped her hands, the silence thickened, shifting from trauma into a heavy, unspoken pull. Marco Valenti was a man who took whatever he wanted. Yet he handled her like something infinitely precious. I have answers, he finally said, his tone icing back into mafia pragmatism. He dropped the manila folder into her lap. About the setup at the Ashwood, Isla's stomach nodded. She opened it. Grainy surveillance photos. Bank records. A printed transcript from a burner phone wiretap. I told you Sonny wouldn't move without an inside man, Marco said, rising to pour 2 fingers of scotch. Someone to confirm my reservation, my security layout, and the exact minute my guard was down. Isla stared at the first photograph. The shadowy booth of a South Philly dive bar. One figure was unmistakably Sonny Barone. The other was a younger man, shoulders hunched, sliding a padded envelope across the table. The air left her lungs in a violent rush. The room tilted. No. She dropped the photo like it was burning. No. That's impossible. He's out of the game. He promised me. Your brother Caleb, Marco stated flatly, dark eyes fixed on her draining face. He owed $60,000 to a Calderona sportsbook. Sonny offered to wipe it clean for intel on my dinner. Caleb handed over the restaurant's layout and my reservation details. A beat. He didn't know you'd be there, Isla. You picked up a coworker's shift that afternoon. He sold my life, and accidentally put yours on the table next to it. Tears spilled hot and fast. The betrayal cut deeper than any glass. She had worked doubles, destroyed her feet, swallowed harassment from customers to pay off their father's debts, while Caleb gambled his life away and then bargained with hers. He couldn't have known I'd be in the crossfire. Isla sobbed into her bandaged hands. Ignorance is not an alibi in my world, Marco said coldly. He sold me to my enemies. The penalty for that is death. Isla shot up from the chair, fear vaporized by a surge of desperate, ferocious protectiveness. She seized the collar of his cashmere sweater and dragged him down to her eye level. You promised me, she hissed, voice trembling with raw emotion. In the car, you said my life debt meant something. You said I was under your protection. Marco's hands clamped down on her hips, anchoring her against him, the proximity electric. You are under my protection, Isla. Caleb is not. He's my blood, she cried, her chest heaving against his. If you kill him, you kill the only family I have left. Spare him, Marco, please, for me. Marco stared down into her tear-filled, defiant eyes, a muscle feathering in his jaw. In the ruthless hierarchy of his world, mercy toward a rat was fatal weakness. It invited mutiny. But looking at the fierce, beautiful woman who had risked everything to save him, the ice fortress around his heart cracked. Sonny has him, Marco finally said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. We intercepted chatter an hour ago. He worked out that the waitress who burned his hit was the rat's sister. His crew took Caleb from his apartment in Kensington tonight. He's bait, to draw me out. Isla's blood ran cold. Where? A dead rail yard by the Delaware, Marco said, releasing her, turning for the door. I leave now. I'm going with you, she demanded. He stopped, looking over his shoulder. Absolutely not. He's my brother, Marco. Sonny wants to punish him for what I did. If I don't go, I'll never forgive myself. Her voice hardened. And I will never forgive you. For a long, agonizing moment, the boss of the Philadelphia underworld weighed the defiance of a 24-year-old waitress. Then, one curt, stiff nod. Get your coat. The rain had become a torrential downpour by the time the convoy of black SUVs rolled into the rusted, decaying husk of the abandoned rail yard. Lightning split the skyline, illuminating skeletal boxcars and dead freight cranes. It was the perfect place for a graveyard. Marco's men fanned out silently, melting into shadow with suppressed rifles. Marco kept Isla directly behind him, his body a physical shield, as they stepped into the freezing mud. Valenti! A voice echoed through the metal canyon. Sonny Barone stood beneath the harsh glare of a portable halogen light, flanked by 6 armed men. Kneeling in the mud beside him, face bruised and bleeding, was Caleb. Isla gasped and lunged. Marco's arm shot out, catching her waist like an iron bar. You actually brought the girl, Sonny sneered, wiping rain off his forehead. Gotta admit, Marco, I didn't think you had one sentimental bone in you. Turns out your weakness wears a waitress apron. Let the boy go, Sonny, Marco said, his voice carrying effortlessly over the pounding rain. It wasn't a request. It was an executioner's final courtesy. This is between you and me. The Monroe family is under my crest now. Sonny laughed, cocked a silver revolver, and pressed the barrel against the back of Caleb's skull. Caleb squeezed his eyes shut, sobbing his sister's name. Under your crest, Sonny spat. This rat sold you for pennies, and cost me my best crew. I'm gonna paint the mud with him, then I'm gonna take my time with her while you watch. Sonny, Marco said softly, a terrifying smile curling one corner of his mouth. Look up. Sonny frowned, eyes darting to the rusted catwalks. A single red laser dot rested dead center on his forehead. A second bloomed on the chest of the guard beside him, then another, and another. Bruno's sniper team had flanked them through the dark, and then Isla saw it. A faint orange ember glowing atop the farthest boxcar, behind Marco's blind side, the silhouette of a 7th shooter leveling a rifle at Marco's back. Marco, the boxcar, she screamed. A sniper's crack answered from the catwalk, and the hidden gunman tumbled into the dark before he could fire. Sonny's face twisted into pure, desperate rage, outmaneuvered twice, both times by her. Knowing he was already dead, he made a split-second, suicidal choice. He ripped the revolver away from Caleb's head and snapped it toward Isla. Time fractured. Marco moved with terrifying speed, throwing his body over hers as Sonny fired. Bang! Marco grunted as the bullet tore through the meat of his left shoulder. In the same millisecond, the rail yard erupted. Bruno's rifle cracked from above, and Sonny's men dropped into the mud like cut marionettes before their weapons cleared. Sonny stumbled back, shoulder shattered by sniper fire, his revolver splashing into the dirt. Marco didn't fall. Bleeding through the dark sweater, he pushed Isla safely behind a rusted steel beam, drew his pistol, and walked slowly, deliberately through the rain toward the gasping Calderon Capo. Wait, Marco, we can deal, Sonny pleaded, clutching his ruined arm, crawling backward through the mud. The docks. I'll give you all of it. Marco stood over him, an angel of death lit by lightning. You aimed at what is mine, Marco said, his voice emptied of every human thing. He raised the weapon and fired twice into Sonny's chest, ending the Calderon threat forever. The silence afterward was absolute, save for the hammering rain. Caleb still knelt in the mud, shaking uncontrollably. Isla ran to him, dropping to her knees, throwing her arms around her brother. Marco holstered his weapon, one hand pressed to his bleeding shoulder, and walked over. Caleb flinched, certain the boss had come to finish it. You sold my life for 60 grand, Caleb, Marco said coldly, looking down at the broken man. By every law of my world, I should leave you in this mud. But your sister bought your life with her courage, twice tonight. He reached into his coat and tossed a thick banded stack of hundreds into the dirt at Caleb's knees. Take it. Get on a bus tonight. Leave Philadelphia. Leave Pennsylvania. And never come back. If my men see your face in this city again, I won't hesitate. Understand? Caleb nodded frantically, scrambling for the money. He looked at Isla, guilt and shame burning in his eyes, but she couldn't look at him anymore. The brother she'd known was already gone. She rose slowly, turned her back on him, and walked to Marco. With trembling hands, she reached up, pressing her fingers around his bleeding shoulder. You took a bullet for me. Marco's dark eyes softened, the ruthless monster melting away to reveal the man beneath. His thumb gently wiped rain and mud from her cheek. "I told you, Isla," he murmured, pulling her flush against his chest, right there in the rain-soaked graveyard of his enemies. "You're mine to protect, and a king always shields his queen." He leaned down and captured her lips in a fierce, consuming kiss that tasted of rain, gunpowder, and an unbreakable vow. Ela kissed him back with equal desperation, arms winding around his neck. The waitress from the Ashwood Grill was dead. In her place stood the undisputed queen of the Philadelphia Syndicate, bound by blood, loyalty, and a love forged in absolute fire. Did Isla make the right choice staying with a ruthless kingpin, or is she just dancing with the devil in a gilded cage? Tell us what you think in the comments below. If this dramatic mafia romance kept you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe for more thrilling, pulse-pounding stories. See you in the next one.